Grüß Gott, guten Abend, danke für euer Kommen. Ich begrüße euch zum zweiten SubnetTALK des heurigen Jahres. Das ist der erste SubnetTALK, den wir im Hybrid-Format machen. Das Hybrid soll heißen, dass wir, auch wenn wir das Digitale mittelmäßig gutieren und es ums Publikum geht, versuchen wir jetzt eine Möglichkeit zu schaffen, dass wir einerseits unsere Redner, aber wie auch unser Publikum digital wie auch analog anwesend haben können. Das Ziel des SubnetTALKs ist im Endeffekt, dass unser Redner einen kurzen Impuls gibt, in diesem Falle der Sebastian Frisch. Und auf dem Impuls folgt dann ein halbstündiger Dialog, wo wir einfach Fragen stellen können. Und das Ziel des Dialogs ist, dass wir gemeinsam eine gute Zeit haben. Sebastian ich kenne Sebastian schon überraschend lang eigentlich, auch wenn ich ihn nie getroffen habe bis jetzt noch. Du hast zuerst mal mit der neuen Mittelschule Lehn ein Kreativ-Kunstprojekt gemacht mit Subnet. Da war der Marius mit dir involviert. Und seitdem treffen sich unsere Wege immer wieder mal. Und jetzt aktuell ist das, Sebastian ist Musiker, Entwickler und Projektmanager bei V2 und betreut die Summer Session, und so haben wir letztes Jahr uns wieder getroffen, und weil wir zusammen Artist in Residence Programme immer wieder betreuen in ganz Europa, und die Summer Session von V2 ist eine Version davon. Und ich glaube, du wirst über Emergent Spaces reden, und deswegen übergebe ich an dich. Ich danke dir vielmals.
Danke dir. So, I switch to English. For all the non-German speakers, my Rüdiger just introduced me. Welcome to my today's SubnetTALK, Emergent Spaces. Thanks a lot, Rüdiger, for inviting me. Since I studied in Salzburg at the University of Applied Sciences, Multimedia Art and Multimedia Technology, I follow the work of Subnet, and I'm super happy to share a bit of my story today. As Rüdiger said, I am also a project manager at V2 in Rotterdam. So first of all, I would like to introduce a bit to my own artistic practice, what I'm doing, where I'm coming from, and then go a bit into detail what I do at V2 and what it all has to do with emergent spaces. After my bachelor, I went to the Netherlands, to The Hague, to the Royal Academy of Art and the Royal Conservatory to study art science. So it's an artistic research master, and it has the subtitle Academy of the Senses. So sensorial experience is really important, and questions like what materials are you using, why are you using whatever you're using, and where you're putting these works became really important. And so my research topic became the park experience. Very funny, I studied in Austria and there's a lot of nature around, so I came to Holland and suddenly the nature became one of my main driving topics. And then I found the book The Soundscape from Murray Schafer, Tuning of the World. In one chapter he talks about hi-fi and lo-fi soundscapes, where hi-fi soundscapes he describes as this novel surrounding where all the animals and plants talk in a perfect environment with each other, in their frequency range, with their loudness. And in cities or urban environments, there are lo-fi soundscapes, so have a lot of broadband noise destroying this hi-fi soundscape. So this is not possible anymore. And I found this concept really fascinating. So crafting hi-fi soundscapes became really like a driving force for my work. So I started to stick microphones into basically anything. And so you have, for example, these Venus fly traps. And it's really hard to capture sound from that, but also depending on what kind of instrumentation you're using. I found a study called Towards Understanding Plant Bioacoustics by Australian researchers, stating that if you're applying a sine tone on corn plants which are submerged in water from one side, they would bend towards this sound source. And as you see in the charts, with 220 Hertz, that works best. That I found very intriguing. So I did a lot of experimentation, and I'm probably world's best corn root grower also. And then made this piece as my graduation work, where you see this corn plants and 2 underwater microphones, which capture the sound underwater, and a speaker in the middle, which plays a 220 Hertz sine tone. That's all connected to a mixer, to headphones. And in this novel piece, you hear these young corn plants talking with each other. And I really love to put this into exhibitions and be the person who gives you a glimpse of a sonic world which is hidden to us, and to give you a sense of a reference experience. So if you listen to the piece and you experienced it and you stood there and saw these corn plants and you were wondering if it's real or not, and it's kind of bizarre, hyper real, that you're coming home and thinking, hey, how would, for example, these 2 plants would talk with each other? How would it sound? And so going further, I was very interested in wood. I was in my grandfather's wood stash, and all these woods were crackling with each other. So I made a huge pine wood slice and stitched heat wire inside, used pietos to capture the sound, and made a piece called Splits and Cracks, where I'll play a little bit of it now. Please a bit louder in the audience. Okay, a bit lower, please. And what I found super fascinating was this detailed universe you can suddenly hear. And if you're in a campfire, you hear this loud cracks, and that's about it. And so there's really a universe of sound suddenly coming out. Fast forwarding to now, I worked on a project for Klimabündnis, Austria, plus some other European climate institutions, on the project Klima Alps, and it's about climate change in alpine regions. So here I was building a earth or soil microphone, where I sticked a metal rod to a pieto and put this into the soil, where you can listen to movements, creatures, all the roots transmitting through wind moved plants into the earth. Play a little bit of this. Or sticked a microphone into a melting glacier. So in the whole process, which is still going on, a documentary or 6 short documentaries were produced on places like glaciers, mountain forests, cities, lake fields, and how climate change changes the sound worlds of those regions. I'll play a little clip of the glacier version. And which was really hard was the time gap, as it's hard to document what was there before this climate change happens from now when there's no documentation there. For example, we found a picture. And on that place, big thanks to Pia and Andreas for making this possible with me. It was really hard to tackle this. So taking all this research with me into the workshop series, Our World of Noises, which Rudika already mentioned before. I started this 2016 as a research project where Subnet, Mozarteum, and a Neue Mittelschule Lehn was involved, where participants also got reference experiences and bringing kids into this weird sound art scenario. It's really difficult to tell a story which is engaging and you get an immediate response if you can communicate the story right or not. But if you do, really a whole world is opening. And for example, we were listening for 1 minute to the environment. And then later I played the 433 from Cage to them and asked them, why is he doing this? And they telling me, yeah, because then the environment is the thing what the people are listening to. And yeah, it's really fascinating to open this sense of listening to people. Also used the library and played a concert for them. Coming to the last piece of my artistic practice I would like to mention today, it's my music project Pangani. And there I make kind of trippy sound worlds and build a instrument which I call the Foley board. It's a sound reactive wooden surface. I use beans and all kinds of things to generate sounds and then manipulate that digitally with effects and stitch a lot of puzzle pieces like bass lines, drums and synthesized elements to it, plus acoustic instruments which are mainly made in improvisation sessions with classical musicians. Classical musicians, as I see music, are very good in speaking this language of music, but telling stories other people, so the composer wrote. So you're having this composition and then you're interpreting or playing this composition. And I'm asking, what does a person need to tell their own stories with this language you already know? So I'm making improvisation sessions with clarinets, harps, vocalists, and so on. And it's a really, overwhelming practice where you try to open people. And for me, it's really a question, what does a person need to open up? Where you feel comfortable, where you are not afraid to just express without judging whatever comes out. And that I play just water. In concert settings like this, where I build with 100-watt RGB LEDs, 5 of them, and a diffuser, you see here. A multisensorial concert setting, so every track has its own essential oil composition and a light composition, and brings you on a full multi-sensorial journey. What again creates this space for the audience to engage, to let the mind travel. Coming to V2. V2 presents, produces, archives, and publishes research at the interface of art, technology, and society. It's an art institute in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and I'm running a monthly online meetup which is called Open Lab. We had that before COVID locally, so people could come to the lab with their questions and we would help them and support them, or they would get help from the lab team. Through COVID, this was not possible anymore, and we thought we could open also the whole scenario up and do it online, and not just give the lab staff possibility to comment on it, but also give everyone, your peers, possibilities to comment, to help. So how a session normally runs is I do a check-in, who you are, what's your name, where you're coming from, what are you doing. So you have 10 minutes presentation, 15 minutes talking about it. With each session it's 2 hours, so there are 4 presentations per session. And then a checkout at the end. What are you taking with you? And I found it really important to have this check-in and check-out to create this space where it's totally okay to say I don't know. And that's also where the tricky part, I think, comes in. What's this space where you feel okay to share your weaknesses? A highlight of each session is the group picture. I like that very much. And a project which came out of there is, for example, the unconventional self, where Werner van der Zwaan, a Rotterdam-based artist who does transform trash objects into robots, was or found Charles, who does human interaction, AI computing, and then they teamed up and did the project Unconventional Self, where you're becoming a chair. And now this project continues. There's now a second object being built, and with a research cluster we are doing with some other project teams, we see where we can push this further. Last but not least, I would like to mention the summer sessions. It's a residency we are doing in the summer. It's an exchange of different artistic institutions in Europe, or the whole world, actually. And the call is open until 1st of May. Schmiede was there last year as a full partner. This year, your host. So someone from the Netherlands maybe ending up in the Schmiede. And we're looking much forward to that. So to conclude, I think emergent spaces needs areas to connect where it's in you or with other people to dream about something which can happen and be human, whatever that means. And with that, I would like to close. Do you have any questions? Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Shall I start then? Oh yeah, please, Jakob. Always love to start. Is it return on?
Thank you for your presentation. Super interesting. You in I think the project with the stage and the light and cooperation with the kind of classical musicians.
Mm-hmm.
You were then, if I understood correctly, kind of trying to open up kind of the floor for interpretation, for improvisation as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned that the classical musicians understand the language very well, but it's somebody else's pieces that they play very well, right? Why not to approach jazz musicians that kind of do it organically, let's say? That improvisation is what they do.
Absolutely. That's what they're doing. It's a. I'm more, in that sense, more interested in this opening scenario. Where does a person need who is not used to playing this? Who I'm at Mozarteum 1 day a week, so I'm really surrounded by very, very classical musicians, and this step of being in your classical bubble and going out there, that's where my huge interest lies. Is that okay? I mean, of course, if you use work with classical musicians, you go jazz musicians, you may go somewhere very different. And for example, one friend of mine, he is a very bebop saxophone player, and when I do an improvisation with him, I get probably the 20th, or multiply the amount of notes I get by 20. So it's a very different game. But yeah, this opening really crystallized for me that I find this fascinating. Thanks.
Okay, then I ask the question. The question I have is really, how do you find a syntax which combines all the worlds you're trying to unite? Because it's really, what I've always find very challenging is, it's easy to talk within one group, but it's very hard to talk across groups. So like, how do you find a kind of a common language? How do you find a common language that you can develop your ideas on? Or does it just come organically?
Can you rephrase it?
How can you, like, how do you create if you say that you try to capture the motions of a wooden plate while heat is applied to it, yeah? But this is for the moment, this is a nice acoustic experience. But at the same time, like, how can you take that what you're listening to a more open level, like where you can compare the two different kind of boards? Like, how can you create a language for that?
You mean a acoustic language on wood crackling?
Yeah, wood crackling, for instance, like, and in each, between science and the arts, for instance, like, it's always difficult from my point of view. It's most people think they mean the same things until they really start to think about the details.
Absolutely.
And so if I tell you about, for like words like cool, those are not words. Yeah, those are uneven emotions.
Uh-huh.
And so like how do you cope with that? Because like from what I understand from your work, a lot of things have to do with very precise emotions and how I can translate it towards an audience.
I think it's always a matter of focus, what you're putting on. If I don't know, and the audience I'm speaking to, if I'm speaking to woodworkers, I'll probably say that there's different acoustic aesthetics on the heat you're applying to whatever. And if it's, but it's a bit the question of if it's process-based or outcome-based. And my work is really process-based. So I'm there for sharing an experience with you, to which you can take with you and do whatever you want with it. And maybe I can spark this little thing in you where you're taking this, and at one situation, you're maybe outside or in your living room, remember this work, and then your mind starts going somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No.
So I have one question from Zoom, sorry, I don't see it right now. From Shanti. Shanti is asking, are you using your plant-based sounds in your Pagani project? And when yes, in which way you get inspired from it?
Yes, I do. A lot even. And how do I get inspired from it? For me, it's a way of beautiful chaos. And there are many roads to... It's so much chaos that you cannot cope with it. And then using this and building worlds around it which are emotionally perceivable, that I find very interesting to have this gap between chaos and order. It's like the question, if you have noises, you have pure chaos, and if you have sounds or harmony, tones, then you have harmony. Where's the gap of chaos and order in a way? I like to play with that.
Thanks a lot for your talk. What I found most interesting in your work that you presented today is your work with natural materials as sources of sound. So I was wondering, is there kind of a dream material you would really like to work with? Like you've worked with wood and glaciers and soil, but is there something you could not yet get your hands on, but you would really like to do? Like kind of natural material that's just too far-fetched yet? Like what's your dream project?
A dream, many. I think fungi is super interesting, like this slime mold growing scenarios. And then a dream project would be having an anechoic chamber and lasers to really go into this really subtle vibrations of natural processes, and then also find these differences, find different aesthetics, and then suddenly you have this super microscopic tool where you can discover things. I think heat cameras could be also interesting, for example. If you go on a bigger scale, you have volcanoes or something. Yeah.
Any questions? If not, then I have one more. I was wondering how do you like from all the recordings, and I always wondered about field recordings and like I mean I'm not sure if you consider yourself like in the field of field recordings. How do you? It sounds nice. It's very. I think it gives a lot. At the same time, I'm always wondering how do you really transform from the recordings to something that you can use then afterwards? Like how is the process? Like where do you decide this is something I would like to use in a certain situation? or is it more like the soundscape that really that is really relevant to you? For instance, the glacier. Yeah? Is it the general soundscape of the glacier that's interesting to you, or is it like particular elements you would like to use in different kind of works afterwards?
I think, as you maybe saw in the video, there you have these different aspects of the glacier. I tried to make some kind of story with it. And you have the field recording just in front of this huge waterfall, and recording as this glacier water just drifts away. And well, that's a lot of noise, whereas the decision making is kind of random, I think, at least in my point of view. Maybe I, through the years, discover hidden beauty in different kind of noises of the glacier. And then I found super fascinating holding this microphone on the glacier itself. I mean, this experience for me, seeing this ice wall and all these air bubbles and water flowing in it, and hearing at the same time this huge, it's like you're squashing snow together, but on a massive scale. And then it's really, you have super huge sounds and then very small drippings. And there, for me, it's a very personal feeling of beauty, I guess. And then my work as an artist being the judge, what I like to show to you, what I found worth it.
Thank you.
This answered your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Then, how does this whole process as an artist factor into your work at V2 as a summer session project manager? How does this does this help you with relating to the artists, or is it actually making it more difficult for you, or how do you combine those two realities?
For me, it really helps me, and I think it's also my whole studies helped me a lot, since I studied multimedia art on the artistic side and multimedia technology on the science side. So, and wrote my master thesis then on what artistic parallels and differences between artistic and scientific research. So this two-sided world is already some kind of in me, and trying to work with artists at the summer sessions or at V2 in general is to listen very closely what the person wants, and then try to be as supportive as possible, and or also give a different view on things. And I try to keep my own practice pretty much out of there. I mean, if there's any skill, let's say, from recording or whatever, computer science skill, which I think can be needed, I can develop and so on, but from an artistic side, I step very much back there. Yeah.
Thank you. So, are there any more questions? Please.
I have one question from Marius, and he says, "Hi, Sebastian. How would you say an acoustic experience is different from a visual experience?"
Hi, Marius. Nice to hear you, read you. I think the acoustic experience is very embodying. It's like touch. Very immediate, very direct, very intimate, nearly. And the visual experience is, at least for me, a bit more distanced. But then it's also the question how you represent it. With my LEDs, for example, you can flicker on a nanosecond scale, and it's so quick that your retina cannot cope with it, so you see hallucinations with your eyes. That's very physical too, in a way, so very direct. But that's also a very special case, I guess. So I think acoustic experience is more bodily touch than the visual.
Okay, then I
Oh, wait, he has a following question.
But you can see something and start to cry. And for hearing, it's the same.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But then again, you probably cry because of your memories. And the memories are triggered by the view and by the sound, in a way. So yeah, it touches your soul. Yeah, so this can go very far now. I hope. Yeah, well, it's an experience, and I think I'm just a bit more sensitive and trained to the acoustic sensation. But I'm pretty sure you can have all kind of very engaging experience with all kind of sensations. I think if you are very trained to smell, that can also make you cry. So there's just a difference, not better or worse, I think.
Thanks for the presentations. I don't let you out of this now. So since you're doing this work, how did it change you personally as a human? And second question, we saw the kids which were confronted with these experiments, and you mentioned some exhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
Could you identify some patterns, how people changed after being involved in this project?
How did it change me as a person? I think I'm much more hunting for details, and as more I listen and experience details, as more I can imagine details around me. So I can very easily drift into daydreaming. That's and also from an emotional point of view, I think it's much easier for me to open to the world and engage. And it's I don't know, my skin tickles 24/7 a day, so it really feels like I have tentacles into everything, which I have to learn how to use them probably every day a bit better. Which also brings my work to a very new level, as this experience I have with the world I try to capture in my work and let other people also experience glimpses of it, what I can make experienceable. On how it changed people after exhibitions, it's hard to say, as I didn't interview people afterwards and not a year later and ask, did it have any impact? But I hope. That's my poetic dream, which drives me every day.
But you observed them. You observed the kids.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I mean, in the workshop scenario, which was 11 times 90 minutes, then you, in the beginning, you're, I don't know, I'm making a quiz, for example, a listening quiz. So I play a sound for them, and then I'm playing a video afterwards showing them what it actually was. So they hear maybe a lot of noise. And then in the video, so there's, say, rain from bushes and all kind of noisy things. And in the end, it's really a small bush in a whole grassland scenario, which is very bizarre. So it really needs hard focus for you. And then going 11 weeks later to them and ask them why Cage made this piece is for me kind of a big step to abstract and to listen to the space, which is also very much out of their regular listening behavior, I think. Yeah, so I think they got something out of it, and maybe have a benefit in life for later for listening to the world a bit more, and did not find it boring to listen to natural environments. Did this answer your question?
Yes, and it gave me new thoughts. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, now I forgot my question. Yeah, if there are no more questions around, then I would like to call it to a close. Any more online questions? No? Then thank you very much for your time, Sebastian. And I think we're going to break it up into smaller groups and end with the official part. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for listening and inviting me.